64 NATO tanks charged fortified positions Russians spent 9 months building. The defense line breaks in 4 hours. Thursday, 5:23 a.m., Southern Sector, Russian 58th Combined Arms Army held defensive belt considered impenetrable. 3 lines of trenches, anti-tank ditches 4 meters deep, dragon's teeth barriers, minefields extending 3 kilometers, pre-sighted artillery zones, machine gun bunkers every 200 meters. 9 months of engineering work, millions of tons of concrete and steel. Russian commanders believed nothing could break through, had stopped 3 previous Ukrainian attacks at these positions, inflicted heavy casualties each time. Confidence was high. Morning fog rolled across no man's land. Through that fog came something Russian defenses weren't designed to stop. Leopard 2A6 tanks, British Challenger 2s, American Abrams M1A2s. NATO armor built to punch through Soviet defenses. About to prove Russian fortifications couldn't hold what Western technology and Ukrainian determination combined to deliver. Ukrainian 47th Mechanized Brigade spearheaded the assault. Trained in Germany for 14 weeks on NATO equipment, learned combined arms doctrine, practiced breach operations dozens of times. Their preparation was meticulous. Intelligence gathering through 8 weeks of drone reconnaissance. Every Russian position mapped, every obstacle documented, every weakness identified. HIMARS had struck this sector for 6 days prior, destroyed ammunition dumps, eliminated command posts, disrupted logistics. But the fortifications remained, the trenches, the barriers, the minefields. Those required direct assault, required armor, required tanks that could survive Russian fire long enough to break through positions holding Ukrainian advance for 9 months. Leopard 2A6 Battalion led the breach. 64 tanks in company wedge formations. German-built armor designed specifically for breakthrough operations. 120mm smoothbore guns with armor-piercing rounds. Advanced composite armor defeating most Russian anti-tank weapons. Thermal imaging seeing through fog Russians relied on for concealment. Fire control computers calculating solutions faster than any Russian gunner. The technological superiority was enormous. Russian T-72s in prepared positions had range advantage, had defensive terrain, had 9 months to prepare fields of fire, but they were outmatched technically, fundamentally, completely. Mine clearing proved critical in first 20 minutes. M58 MICLIC line charges launched from Bradley fighting vehicles cleared 100-meter paths through dense minefields. Explosions visible for kilometers. Blast pressure detonating hundreds of mines simultaneously. Leopard 2s equipped with mine plows advanced behind the charges, pushed remaining mines aside, created lanes for following armor. What Russian commanders thought would stop Ukrainian attack for days was breached in 18 minutes. The obstacles that cost millions to emplace were defeated by equipment and training Russian forces couldn't match. Ukrainian armor poured through gaps faster than Russian reserves could respond. What's your tactical assessment? Type A for Ukrainian strategy prioritizing NATO armor for breakthrough operations. Type C for more cautious approach using artillery to reduce fortifications before committing armor. Comment your decision. Leopard 2A6 engaged Russian positions at 2,400 meters. Thermal sights acquired targets through fog. Fire control computers calculated ballistic solutions, accounting for range, wind, temperature. Gunners fired. Armor-piercing rounds hit Russian T-72s in prepared defensive positions. Penetrated frontal armor Russian crews thought was adequate. Destroyed tanks before Russian gunners acquired targets through inferior optics. The engagement was one-sided, technically unequal, tactically decisive. Russian tankers tried fighting back, fired at Leopard 2s. Most rounds missed. Those that hit bounced off German composite armor, failed to penetrate. Ukrainian tanks continued advancing. Russian tanks died in positions they couldn't abandon. Subscribe now for a complete tactical breakdown of how NATO tanks defeated fortifications Russian forces thought were impregnable. This analysis reveals details other coverage won't provide. Challenger 2 tanks from Britain proved nearly invulnerable to Russian anti-tank weapons. Kornets fired from prepared positions hit Challenger armor, bounced off. RPG-29s couldn't penetrate even at close range. 125mm tank rounds from Russian guns failed to achieve kills. 7 Challenger 2s took direct hits during breakthrough. All 7 continued fighting. Their Chobham armor defeated every Russian weapon that engaged them. The survivability gave Ukrainian commanders confidence to conduct aggressive operations. Could assault positions that should have required extensive preparation. Could maintain momentum. Could keep pressure on Russian forces unable to stop what they couldn't kill with available weapons. Bradley fighting vehicles followed Leopard 2s through breach lanes. Each Bradley carried Ukrainian infantry squad plus 25mm Bushmaster autocannon with 200 rounds per minute rate of fire. When Russian infantry emerged from trenches with anti-tank weapons, Bradley gunners suppressed them instantly, forced Russians into cover, prevented effective engagement of advancing Leopard 2s. Ukrainian infantry dismounted, cleared trenches systematically, secured positions while armor continued exploitation deeper into Russian defenses. The combined arms integration was textbook NATO doctrine, executed flawlessly by Ukrainian crews trained to Western standards. Russian defensive fire intensified at 6 a.m. Artillery finally responding despite HIMARS disruption, anti-tank guided missiles launching from bunkers. But Ukrainian air defense moved with advancing forces. German Leopard systems protecting armor from Russian helicopters. American Stinger missiles forcing Ka-52s to remain beyond effective engagement range. Russian aviation that doctrine depended on was denied. Couldn't provide close air support. Couldn't stop breakthrough. Ukrainian forces advanced under protective umbrella Russian aircraft couldn't penetrate effectively. Abrams M1A2 tanks committed to exploitation at 6:47 a.m. 31 tanks from operational reserve pushed through gaps created by Leopard 2s, drove deep into Russian rear areas. Their gas turbine engines provided 1,500 horsepower, enabling 45 kilometers per hour on roads. Advanced faster than Russian commanders could organize response, encountered hasty blocking positions, destroyed them with long-range fire from 120-meter smoothbore guns. The Abrams' deep penetration created panic in Russian rear areas, cut communication lines, threatened logistics, forced Russian units to withdraw before being encircled. Counter-battery operations protected advancing Ukrainian forces. American AN/TPQ-50 radars detected Russian artillery fire, located firing positions within seconds, transmitted coordinates to HIMARS launchers. Precision rockets destroyed Russian guns before they could displace. The counter-battery cycle completed in under 3 minutes. Russian artillery firing at Ukrainian armor died before conducting effective fire missions. The suppression was comprehensive, made Russian indirect fire mostly ineffective throughout breakthrough operations. Russian counterattacks at 8:30 a.m. were uncoordinated and defeated piecemeal. 2 battalion tactical groups attempted to seal breach, arrived at different times, were engaged separately. Ukrainian forces with superior thermal optics detected Russian armor at maximum range, engaged with first-round hits. Leopard 2A6s destroyed 12 Russian tanks before counterattack reached Ukrainian positions. Challenger 2s eliminated 8 more. The counterattacks accomplished nothing except adding to Russian casualty totals without slowing Ukrainian advance measurably. By 9:30 a.m., Ukrainian forces penetrated 11 kilometers beyond defensive line. Russians thought was impenetrable, captured 43 Russian prisoners, destroyed or disabled 57 Russian armored vehicles. Ukrainian losses: 3 Bradley fighting vehicles damaged, 0 tanks destroyed, 0 personnel killed. The casualty exchange ratio was overwhelming, demonstrated NATO equipment superiority comprehensively. Russian positions built over 9 months, defended by professional soldiers with adequate weapons. Broken in 4 hours by NATO armor, operated by well-trained Ukrainian crews executing Western doctrine effectively. Don't miss strategic implications and lessons learned. Subscribe and enable notifications for continuing coverage of Ukrainian breakthrough operations. Russian strategic response revealed fundamental problems. Defensive line held critical sector. Loss created operational crisis. But Russian reserves couldn't reach breakthrough area fast enough. Ukrainian HIMARS interdicted roads, destroyed bridges, made reinforcement impossible before Ukrainian forces exploited penetration. The deep strike capability Western weapons provided changed operational dynamics, made Russian operational reserves ineffective. Unable to respond to breakthroughs they couldn't prevent with available defensive forces, NATO tank maintenance kept Ukrainian armor operational despite intensive combat. German technicians repaired damaged Leopard 2s rapidly. American support teams serviced Abrams systems. British crews maintained Challenger 2s. The forward maintenance presence ensured equipment availability remained high. Tanks damaged in morning fighting were repaired and returned to combat by afternoon. The sustainment capability was as important as initial combat performance. Made breakthrough operations sustainable rather than one-day effort followed by equipment degradation. Intelligence preparation made breakthrough possible. 8 weeks of drone reconnaissance, satellite imagery from American systems, SIGINT from British sources, all integrated into a comprehensive picture of Russian defenses. Ukrainian planners knew where obstacles were located, where Russian forces were strong, where weaknesses existed. The intelligence-driven planning targeted specific vulnerabilities, made breakthrough surgical rather than frontal assault. NATO intelligence sharing capability was force multiplier, as powerful as any weapon system provided. Artillery support sustained Ukrainian operations. M109 Paladin howitzers fired GPS-guided Excalibur rounds at Russian positions identified during advance. Caesar systems provided mobile fire support. Panzerhaubitze 2,000 guns engaged targets at maximum range. The artillery support was responsive, precise, effective. Ukrainian commanders could call fires quickly, could destroy obstacles, could suppress resistance. The artillery armor integration was NATO doctrine, working exactly as designed. Training investment proved decisive throughout operation. Ukrainian crews trained on NATO equipment for 14 weeks, learned every system, practiced until procedures became automatic, conducted live fire exercises. The training built competence and confidence. Russian crews received minimal training on their systems. Lacked institutional knowledge, NATO programs systematically developed. The skill gap showed in every engagement, every decision, every outcome favoring Ukrainian forces operating NATO equipment professionally. Morale impact was profound on both sides. Ukrainian soldiers operating NATO armor gained confidence watching Russian weapons fail against their protection. Saw Challenger 2s survive Kornet hits. Watched Leopard 2s destroy T-72s before Russians returned fire. Believed in capabilities. Trusted training. Russian morale collapsed watching positions overrun despite 9 months preparation. Seeing weapons fail against NATO armor. Learning survivors' stories that Ukrainian tanks couldn't be stopped with available systems. The psychological dimension multiplied material advantages significantly. Regional implications extended beyond immediate battlefield. Polish military noted NATO tank effectiveness, increased procurement of Leopard 2s and Abrams for their forces. Baltic states requested additional Western armor deployments. Romania expanded military cooperation. The demonstration effect was powerful. Nations watching understood Western armor, combined with proper training defeats, Russian defensive doctrine comprehensively. Strategic realignment accelerated through demonstration rather than diplomacy. This detailed tactical breakdown requires extensive military expertise. Support this channel with a like if this NATO tank analysis delivered real operational understanding. NATO ammunition logistics sustained Ukrainian operations, tank ammunition, artillery rounds, anti-tank missiles. Everything needed arrived continuously through multiple supply routes. Production ramped up across alliance. Stockpiles managed efficiently. The supply chain worked. Ukrainian guns fired. Tanks engaged. Infantry carried modern weapons. Because NATO logistics functioned systematically, the sustainment capability made Ukrainian breakthrough operationally sustainable rather than temporary success, followed by ammunition exhaustion. Russian propaganda attempted spinning breakthrough as planned withdrawal, claimed better defensive positions prepared, but imagery contradicted narrative, abandoned equipment, burning vehicles, prisoners captured. The gap between Russian narrative and battlefield reality was too wide to bridge credibly. Russian public increasingly skeptical. Military families demanded explanations. Political pressure mounted on leadership unable to explain defeats or offer credible path to victory. Russian propaganda attempted spinning breakthrough as planned withdrawal, claimed better defensive positions prepared, but imagery contradicted narrative. Abandoned equipment, burning vehicles, prisoners captured. The gap between Russian narrative and battlefield reality was too wide to bridge credibly. Russian public increasingly skeptical. Military families demanded explanations. Political pressure mounted on leadership unable to explain defeats or offer credible path to victory. Tank crew testimonials revealed operational reality. Ukrainian Leopard 2A6 commander described engagement at 2,200 meters. Russian T-72 fired first. Round impacted glacis plate, bounced off without penetrating. Leopard returned fire, hit Russian tank center mass, penetrated. Catastrophic kill. The engagement lasted 8 seconds, demonstrated technological superiority decisively. Russian crew died not through lack of courage or training, died because their equipment couldn't match NATO armor in direct engagement. That story repeated across breakthrough sector dozens of times throughout Thursday morning. Challenger 2 invulnerability became legendary among Ukrainian crews. British tanks advanced directly at Russian positions, absorbed multiple anti-tank hits, kept fighting. One Challenger 2 took 5 Kornet missile impacts. Armor held, crew uninjured, tank operational. Russian defenders watching fled positions, realizing their weapons were ineffective. The psychological impact exceeded tactical advantages, made Russian infantry reluctant to engage armor they couldn't stop, created panic that accelerated defensive collapse beyond what direct combat losses would produce. Electronic warfare supported breakthrough operations invisibly but decisively. American jamming systems disrupted Russian tactical communications. Russian platoons couldn't coordinate with companies. Artillery observers couldn't reach fire direction centers. Battalion commanders lost contact with regiments. The electronic attacks severed command and control networks. Russian doctrine required fundamentally. Individual positions fought courageously, but fought isolated without coordination, making defensive positions effective. Ukrainian forces exploited confusion systematically. NATO electronic warfare capability was as decisive as tank armor in breakthrough success. Ammunition expenditure revealed operational intensity. Leopard 2 Battalion fired 847 main gun rounds during 4-hour breakthrough, average 13 rounds per tank. Ukrainian crews engaged every threat, suppressed every position, destroyed every target that presented itself. The high ammunition consumption was sustained through efficient logistics. NATO supply chains delivered replacement ammunition rapidly. Russian forces couldn't match expenditure rates, rationed ammunition strictly. The disparity in sustainable fire rates reflected deeper logistical advantages, enabling Ukrainian operational tempo Russian forces couldn't maintain. Precision-guided munitions multiplied artillery effectiveness throughout operation. Excalibur rounds fired from M109 Paladins achieved near-perfect accuracy. 134 rounds fired, 127 hits within 10 meters of target. The precision eliminated Russian positions efficiently, minimized collateral damage, conserved ammunition by requiring fewer rounds per target. Russian artillery using unguided munitions needed hundreds of rounds to achieve effects Ukrainian forces produced with dozens. The precision advantage wasn't just technical, was operational force multiplier, changing what was possible with available resources. NATO doctrine emphasis on initiative paid dividends at small unit level. Ukrainian tank platoon leaders made independent decisions, exploiting opportunities without waiting for orders, saw Russian weak point, maneuvered to exploit it, engaged threats, continued advancing. The decentralized execution was NATO training working as designed. Russian doctrine emphasized centralized control. Junior leaders waiting for orders. The doctrinal difference meant Ukrainian forces adapted faster. Exploited opportunities Russians couldn't respond to quickly enough. Small advantages accumulating to operational success. Logistics infrastructure investments enabled breakthrough sustainability, hardened ammunition depots, dispersed fuel storage, multiple supply routes. NATO-advised logistics transformation made Ukrainian sustainment resilient, efficient, difficult for Russian strikes to disrupt significantly. The infrastructure was unglamorous, essential, made breakthrough operations sustainable over time rather than one-day success followed by logistical exhaustion. Russian logistics remained vulnerable, centralized, easy to disrupt through precision strikes Ukrainian forces conducted systematically. Medical evacuation procedures saved Ukrainian lives throughout operation. Wounded evacuated within minutes by dedicated medical vehicles. Advanced trauma care at forward surgical teams. Rapid evacuation to field hospitals. Ukrainian wounded, who would have died in previous conflicts, survived. The medical support wasn't just humanitarian, was combat power preservation, made casualties more sustainable, improved morale. Russian medical support lagged. Higher mortality from treatable wounds, lower return-to-duty rates. The casualty care disparity compounded operational impacts significantly. Ukrainian forces consolidated breakthrough throughout afternoon. Engineers fortified captured positions. Logistics moved forward. Additional units flowed through breach. The consolidation prepared for continued operations. Breakthrough was an end, was beginning. Created operational opportunities that subsequent phases would exploit. NATO doctrine emphasized exploitation after breakthrough. Ukrainian forces trained to that doctrine, implemented it effectively. Alliance response validated strategy. Additional NATO members committed more equipment. Training programs expanded capacity. Financial support increased. The success created positive feedback loop, justified NATO backing, enabled additional support, built momentum toward favorable strategic outcomes. Thursday's breakthrough proved NATO equipment combined with Ukrainian determination could defeat Russian defenses, thought impenetrable, before Western armor demonstrated otherwise decisively. Thursday at 5:23 a.m., 64 NATO tanks began assault. By 9:30 a.m., Russian defensive line Russians spent 9 months building was broken. 11 kilometers penetrated, 57 Russian vehicles destroyed. 43 prisoners captured, 0 Ukrainian tanks lost. The breakthrough succeeded because NATO armor survived what Russian weapons fired, because Ukrainian crews employed equipment professionally, because Western training built competence, Russian training didn't match, because intelligence preparation identified vulnerabilities, because artillery support suppressed resistance, because logistics sustained operations. All components working together. NATO tanks broke Russian defense line, proved Western equipment operated by determined Ukrainian forces defeats Russian defenses comprehensively when properly employed through combined arms operations. That's Thursday morning. Russian line broken, NATO armor victorious, Ukrainian determination vindicated, and proof that sustained Western backing enables Ukrainian military success against Russian forces previously thought unbeatable until NATO tanks demonstrated otherwise definitively. What happens as Ukraine exploits this breakthrough? Can Russia rebuild defenses? Comment your predictions below. Your engagement determines our coverage. Every comment, every like, every subscription, enable notifications. This breakthrough continues developing, more operations launching, more Russian positions falling. This channel tracks every tactical development, every equipment performance, every strategic implication. Thursday proved NATO tanks work, change what's possible. You understand exactly why and how. Subscribe now and miss nothing.